Is there a problem with Bam Adebayo's offense this season? Averaging just 11 points a game. We'll break down what's gone wrong. Plus, Tyler Herro finally puts to rest the idea of coming off the bench, and we look ahead to tonight's matchup versus the Knicks on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. Got a jam-packed show for you today. Tyler Herro says the conversation about him coming off the bench is over, and we look ahead to the Heat's biggest test of the season so far. But first, your favorite podcast now is a newsletter introducing the Locked On Heat daily newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Heat newsletter. Today's episode is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Let's start with Bam Adebayo, David, who's averaging 11 points on 39% shooting for the Miami's first 3 games. He's yet to make a three-pointer in the regular season. Let's go back to an old game that we were playing over the summer. How hot is your concern level on the Scoville scale? Mild, hot, or what was it? Like habanero was the spiciest? Ghost pepper, something like that?
Ghost pepper. Yeah, I'm not quite ghost pepper. I think it's only 3 games. He had a more efficient outing on Monday night. And that being the case, I'm still going mid-level habanero, I would say. Not quite mild, because there are some concerns there, because he was expected to take on a bigger role. And we saw the three-point shooting manifest during the preseason. We thought it was a legitimate option. You made a bold prediction that looks highly questionable at this point in time.
Yep.
I've got to. It's just it was really bold when you made it, and now it just seems completely outrageous in comparison to what we've seen from Bam Adebayo. He's passing up shots and he's not hitting the ones that he's taking. So there's concern, but at the same time, I wouldn't say it's full panic mode just yet. Not ghost pepper level of panic.
Habanero, jalapeno, just spicy enough for you to notice it. That's kind of where I'm at with Bam, right? It's okay. I see you. I feel you. I understand what's happening here. It could get worse, right? It's like maybe like one of those hot sauces, perhaps, that it's like, oh, what are you talking about? It's not that spicy. And then like a few seconds go by and you're like, oh no, this is worse than I thought it was going to be. And so that's kind of where we're at. Maybe, hopefully not, I suppose, with Bam, just 3 games into the year here. You know, I made the point after yesterday's post-game show. It just feels like the offense isn't running through Bam as much as it had in the preseason. And his touches are just down, right? Like, we made a big deal about Jimmy Butler's touches after the first game. He was 7th on the team in touches in that loss to the Magic. Well, Bam was 6th. It wasn't like he was all over the ball either. But since then, Jimmy against Charlotte and Detroit has taken over the offense and has led the team in touches in those games. And Bam hasn't. Like, he still hasn't really bounced back. And I don't know. It's hard to figure out where his role on the team is going to be when you're basically asking Jimmy Butler to play like a star player, because it's a contract year essentially for him, and he needs to kind of play like that to prove that he can have that next contract. And then you're kind of asking Tyler and Terry to step up as shooters, right? Not necessarily as playmakers, but just guys who are going to launch the ball. And where Bam fits in has been a little bit of a struggle early on, but it's not one that can't be fixed. Because I do think we saw a version of it in the preseason that works, with Bam as a hub of offense in that triple threat spot, top of the floor, dribble handoffs, facilitating for others. If they can get back to that, I think Bam's going to be okay, because when the ball's in his hands more, he's just going to be able to take more three-pointers when teams are leaving him open. He's going to obviously have the opportunity to score a little bit more, even if it's a little bit more self-created stuff. Bam's been fine with that for the most part, especially when he's playing in space. So, a little concerned, but not overly concerned yet.
Have you noticed an uptick in his touches? Like the amount of touches, clearly, I mean, just 1 of 5 in that first game against Orlando, then 6 of 17 in the next game against the Hornets, albeit in a win, and then 5 of 9 in that win against Detroit. So it's not like he's putting up a massive number of shots, but at least does he have more possessions where he has the ball in his hands? And then, do you have the numbers on that by any chance?
Well, I got his usage rating right here is 15% from that Detroit game. I mean, that's nothing. That's
That's not
nothing.
good.
I was making fun of
That's
Jimmy Butler for a 16% usage rate and calling him Chris Boucher. Bam's being used
right.
less than Chris Boucher. I mean, he's barely a factor in the offense right now.
So there is a concern then in that sense because this seems like it's
A
less on
schematic
Bam
one.
and more.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's more a result of what the offense is looking to do. When you look at what Terry and Tyler did in terms of launching 12 3-pointers apiece, that's clearly the priorities. Putting up shots, getting a lot of those going, and seeing if they fall. They did not fall as much as you'd like them to against the Detroit Pistons, but it was just enough again to pull out a win. But if it's at the cost of minimizing Bam and his role on offense, I don't know if there's got to be some way of finding a balance between the two. You've got to be able to put up shots and at the same time get Bam involved and not have him just be a minor role player, not even Chris Boucher
Well,
in Miami's offense.
is it possible to even do that? I mean, do the Heat have like a too many guys problem right now? We're talking about 4 guys who need the ball to different degrees, but need the ball. Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Herro, and Terry Rozier. Like, that's a lot of guys who need the ball in their hands and need to get shots. Like, should we just assume that on a night-to-night basis, a game-to-game basis, rather, one of these guys just isn't going to get those touches? There's only one basketball. It's kind of that problem where even the big 3 didn't necessarily have this issue because at least it was only 3 guys that you're really trying to feed. Right now, it's 4. And I don't really know a team that has 4 guys who need the basketball the way that these guys need the basketball.
Because none of them are going to be up such monster numbers where there's that clear.
Right.
Is that what it boils down to?
Even if you look at Boston, like Derek White doesn't really
Yeah.
need the ball. Drew Holiday doesn't need the ball. Porzingis is good
Right.
for like a couple of post ups a game, but that's really it. I mean, it's basically Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Yeah, I think that this is like to try to figure
Hierarchical
like,
problem.
it's a little bit, right? Or just like, hey, like Jimmy, Bam, Tyler, and Terry. Like that's sort of the concern we had with that backcourt is it's very offensive driven, not necessarily maybe as balanced as we had hoped that a championship caliber backcourt would be, or whatever the situation is. But yeah, maybe it's just when you have 4 guys who need the basketball, it's just never going to happen. Not all four guys aren't going to touch the basketball evenly every single game. One of them is just sort of going to be the odd man out.
Did Bam speak after the Pistons game?
He did, but they did that thing where a couple of players go to the podium and then a couple of players speak in the locker room. So Bam did talk and didn't get a chance to catch those quotes. I think he talked. He was supposed to talk. Jimmy was talking in the locker room, so I stuck with Jimmy.
Yeah, I know, and it makes sense. At the same time, I'm just wondering, like they're winning, and so I wonder if there's frustration there because I don't think there is, and some people have
No.
questioned this. Is like is this more akin to what Bam would prefer, given that he can concentrate on everything else and not necessarily put up those numbers? I don't know. It's a tough question, and only one that he could answer because I thought he was poised to put up big numbers this season, especially if he's implementing the 3-point shot. That's my biggest concern is that when he does have those possessions and they get some open looks, and I went through some of the film yesterday and that went against Detroit, there were a couple looks there where he certainly could have shot it. He just seems hesitant. Like given his height, given his release point and the fluidity of that shot, which we've seen, he can get that shot off over Isaiah Stewart. That shouldn't have been a problem. And yet there were moments there where he hesitated and he was just waiting for the play to develop and break down. And that kind of takes him out of that rhythm. And maybe he's just stuck in his head a little bit in terms of that shot just hasn't fallen. And I don't know if I feel entirely comfortable. There was that one open look that we talked about yesterday from the corner where Jimmy Butler set him up with a nice pass to the corner. And I thought that was money. It just did not fall. So there's got to be those opportunities for him to knock those shots down. At the same time, maybe this is just the new normal. This is just the way that it's going to be with Tyler and Terry and Jimmy putting up the shots that they do. And that's kind of minimizing Bam's role. But I will say this much. Looking forward to, and I know that this is a part of our preview later on, I think he would have a big game against Karl Anthony Towns. That typically is a matchup that Bam licks his lips for there. He's quite excited about going up against a former Kentucky player. I think he would be appreciative of the opportunity there. And Cat, although improved in the defensive end, I don't know that he necessarily is going to be able to contain Bam.
It helps when you have Rudy Gobert next to you, and now he doesn't. But no, to your point, like this might be matchup driven where all 4 guys are not going to be they're not going to just be able to touch the ball as much as you would think in a vacuum. And maybe it's just going to be matchup driven against the Pistons. They're not known for their perimeter defense necessarily, right? Like they didn't even have their Thompson twin out there, who's their best perimeter defender in that game. So for Tyler Herro and Terry Rozier, it made sense that they were able to kind of go off, right? And for Bam, they've got some size in the middle. Jalen Duren, Tobias Harris, some other guys, like even Fontecchio is kind of big. Like there's some size that they could pack the paint with. Bickerstaff is a defensive coach who packs the paint. That is his priority there. So maybe that's why Bam wasn't really able to go off. But you know what? It's kind of funny. You get 2 good games in a row from Jimmy Butler. You get a good game from Tyler Herro and a good game from Terry Rozier, all things considered, even though they missed a bunch of shots. It was still a good game for both of them. And people are like, nitpicking, like, oh, what's going on with Bam? It's like, well, they got the win. And I just think that not all these things are going to hit on the same night. There's too many guys who need the basketball. And I think there's going to be an odd man out pretty much every night just because of the way that this team is built. But the good thing about Bam is he could still win you a game on the defensive end, even if he's not contributing that much on the offensive end. Tyler Herro says the conversation about his role on the team is over. We'll tell you what he said after this, coming up next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. They've got a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams played live even easier, but it's not just teams. If you want to go catch a concert, comedy shows, theater, whatever you're interested in, you need tickets for, Gametime's got you covered. And Gametime Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Great. Very convenient. You know how much of a pain it could be when you're trying to find those seats for a show that you're looking for. Well, Gametime Picks has you covered. But not only that, they've also got their all-in pricing, a feature that shows you the total right up front, so you know there's no surprise fees at checkout. You got the seat view, so you can get a panoramic view of where you're sitting. Let's say it's a venue you're not familiar with. You want to make sure you get a great look at the stage or home plate or whatever it might be. Well, guess what? Now you can do that via Gametime. So take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen of the day. The best way to support the show is to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Barry Jackson from the Miami Herald spoke to Tyler Herro about Udonis Haslem's comments from the summer that he should come off the bench this season. Of course, that has not happened. Tyler Herro and Terry Rozier have talked a lot about proving people wrong who think that they shouldn't start together, and that apparently includes UD. So when Jackson asked Herro if he was happy to remain a starter this season, Tyler Herro said, quote, "Yeah, I would say so. I was hoping to be a starter, so yeah, I thought I should start. I don't think it's even really a conversation anymore. It's a narrative people create around me," end quote. So, David, Tyler Herro has come off the bench only twice over these last 3 seasons, including the 3 games this year. And the only 2 times he did it was because he was working his way back from injury. Do you think he's right? And that the idea of him coming off the bench isn't even a conversation worth having anymore because that part of his career is over?
I'm starting to lean that way. I think he's looked impressive in the first couple of games, and at the same time, there's something that I can't seem to kind of wrap. It's something that sticks in my craw a little bit. Like, we've heard the point before, and I think the more vocal critics of Tyler would point out, no player is above the idea of coming off the bench or not, if it's what helps the team, etc. But I think when you look at what Tyler's capable of doing in his age and everything else like that, I think we are past that point. I think we just have to make sure that he is put into place to succeed and that he can continue to contribute to winning. And that's on him as much as it is on the team. At the same time, I think having that conversation over and over when it seems like it's unlikely to ever, become an option again is probably moot at this point. So I'm ready to kind of put this one to bed and just say, you know what, this is over. There's no chance of Tyler coming off the bench again. I don't know. Again, like I was saying, I think there's something about a player just being that kind of at that point where they could say, you know what, no way, I'm never coming off the bench again. I don't know.
Well, if I can give him credit, I didn't go through all the quotes here as we sort of introduced this segment, but he did say there was another quote here that he gave to Barry Jackson. He says, "I'm a starter in the NBA. I'm a team guy. I would love to come off the bench if that's what was needed, but I'm a starter. It doesn't take away from anything else that I bring, which is I'm a great teammate. I love seeing other guys have success," end quote. So he has gone out of his way to say, look, if they need that from me, then he'll come off the bench. But I think his point is like, dude, I haven't come off the bench in 3 years. Why are we still talking about this? I came off the bench. I won 6th man of the year. And then I got promoted at my job because I was the best at that other thing that I was doing. And whatever we could think about, we can have the argument, and I think it's a fair argument. Does the starting lineup work better with Tyler Herro out, Duncan Robinson in that spot, all these things? The one thing that you could say about Tyler Herro is he's a very consistent scorer. Maybe he's not always efficient, but he finds ways to get shots off. And this is an offense that desperately needs that and has desperately needed it for the last couple of years. And it hasn't always worked in terms of boosting Miami's overall offensive rating. But if Tyler Herro is embracing this catch and shoot stuff, the way we saw against Detroit, the way that we saw so much in the preseason, defensively, I think he's been more active. In passing lanes. Say whatever you want about Duncan Robinson's fit in the starting lineup. Tyler Herro is a better defender than Duncan Robinson at this stage, which, the bar is really low, but at least he's a playmaker on that end where Duncan Robinson can't really say that. And then as a rebounder, he's good too. And as a playmaker, he's grown a lot in that regard. So there's a lot of other things there. And if he's, dribbling the air out of the ball less, then I don't really see what the problem with his fit in the starting lineup would be. But again, all of this stuff might just be moot because the Miami Heat have decided you can have all the arguments you want in the comments section of this podcast as much as you want and on Twitter or wherever. The Miami Heat have clearly decided that Tyler Herro is a starting player for them. And that has been the case now for 3 years.
I'm part of that at the very least, that they're trying to give him the opportunity to grow, put up big numbers, and then if necessary, potentially include him in a trade package for a superstar player. That feels like that was the angle 2 years ago. Not so much necessarily this year. I think they're kind of stuck together for better or for worse. So I don't know if that's really an option anymore, but I don't know. Look, the idea is, you just talked about this in the first segment. Too many mouths to feed in that starting lineup. And if you take one of those mouths and bring him off the bench, Duncan, not necessarily a guy that needs the ball. He's much more of a catch and shoot guy. And he can create opportunities by putting the ball down, etc. And if he's playing alongside the starters, it's still a good option. It has to be worth exploring. I just don't know if either Terry or Tyler are better coming off the bench in that sense and giving them the opportunity to just kind of cut loose. Of the two, who do you think would be the better complement if Duncan Robinson were starting? Let's just say this is the rhetorical question.
This is kind of literally what Tyler Herro was talking about. Like, why even have this conversation anymore? The answer is Terry Rozier, just because his ceiling defensively is more than what Tyler Herro can bring. So it's sort of the same thing. It's like, all right, well, Terry Rozier might be our best defender at that position, which is saying a lot, but that's sort of the reality of it. So maybe him, but yeah, I don't know. I'm at the point now where I don't even think it's like first of all, it's a tired argument. I'm kind of sick of having it on this show and just in person with people and all these things. And it does sort of feel like the Heat are kind of dismissing it with their actions, right? Like, and here's the other part of this too that I found interesting, that Udonis Haslem saying that over the summer. You and I debated, well, does UD know something? Because obviously he's still connected with the team, or is he just sort of saying stuff? And it turns out he was just saying stuff. And it's kind of funny where we think like all the players that are even in the organization, they know more than we do. Sometimes they don't. Like, I'm sure they know more about other things, but sometimes they're just repeating the same lines that they see on Twitter and in comment section also, right? And I think that was the case with UD was, and by the way, it is a valid argument. Like, you can have the argument that the offense functions better, or had functioned at least better, with Duncan Robinson in that starting lineup. That's not to say it's an invalid argument. My point is that maybe it was never really a conversation and an argument within the Heat's walls. And that's sort of what it's starting to feel like.
And that's fine. But at the same time, I think you have a portion of the fan base that would wonder, well, why isn't it a conversation? Like, I don't know what the rationalization is that, because at this point, when you're just okay, and Miami's been just okay, and certainly they have been just okay over the last couple seasons, and you can point to injury and everything else as a reason for that. Why isn't it more of a part of the conversation? Like, I know it's tired, and I know that we don't necessarily want to have it. Maybe I'm just playing a little bit of devil's advocate here, but like, why isn't that a conversation that the team should be having? When Barry himself, Barry Jackson, at the bottom of the piece, kind of burying the lead here a little bit, kind of throws, oh, by the way, Miami starters, their numbers have not been great, but at the same time, he also adds, well, Phoenix's starters haven't been great, and they've got superstars on that talent. So, superstar talent on that starting lineup. So it might not necessarily be a reflection of talent, but something isn't working with the starting group. The on-off numbers just kind of suck. They've been kind of blown out a little bit, especially.
I don't know. it's 3 games. Like, I'm not taking the total plus minus seriously. Like, they got blown out by the Orlando Magic. That was it. Like, that's most of the plus
in
minus
the
here.
third
They won the
quarter.
last 2
And
games,
it
you know?
happened in third quarter against Detroit too, though. I mean, they only put up 17 points that quarter, right? Was it 14 or
Yeah, but like
17?
we
Either
talked
way, it
about
was
that. I thought the
miserable.
shots were good. They'll fall more. Like those
They
shots
did.
will fall more often, you know? And I don't blame and if somebody's going to hit those shots, it's going to be somebody like Tyler Herro or Duncan Robinson, I
I was
suppose.
looking through his shot diet in the third quarter of that game, and it wasn't bad. So
Just-
many of the shots,
yeah.
honestly, it was just they rimmed right out. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
they were online, they were
He
great.
missed
There was
4
one of the
wide
yeah,
open looks in a row. I looked at the numbers. 41 of their 47 three-point attempts were considered open or wide open.
yeah,
It is a borderline miracle for the Detroit Pistons that was even a game. In every other circumstance, Miami's shot quality in that game, and by the way, you earn the shot quality, right? Like you
yeah.
run
They
off the
created those
ball,
looks.
you
Yeah,
create open shots. Jimmy Butler, Terry Rozier, Tyler Herro getting to the basket, creating shots for others. Like 10 times out of 10, that's a blowout. Like it's kind of crazy that it wasn't. So
yeah,
yeah, I mean, we can try having the conversation. The thing I keep going back to is this. I think that maybe in the past, certainly the floor for Miami's offense was higher with Duncan Robinson. When
yeah.
with Tyler Herro in there, it was just a little bit more volatile. But I always like this. The Heat aren't concerned with their floor. The Heat are always concerned with their ceiling. And I thought the best version of this team, if everything works and everything clicks into place, is with somebody like Tyler Herro, who's just a little bit more dynamic as an offensive player. Like, who's the better player, Tyler Herro or Duncan Robinson? The answer is very clear there. So that's where your ceiling gets pushed higher. And if you have to get through those growing pains, then that's what you have to do. And I think the Heat were always willing to live with that, understanding that it wasn't as smooth as it could otherwise look. And I think they're deciding, hey, like this is what we're doing. And I think you hit something important earlier. Like when they first started to promote Tyler Herro into that starting lineup, I do think that they were trying to showcase him a little bit, right? And also to just sort of stretch, like, what else can this guy do? I think all of that is part of it because this team is always more concerned about their ceiling than their floor. And I think the best version of Tyler Herro in that starting lineup has a higher ceiling than even maybe the best version of Duncan Robinson in that starting lineup. That would be at least my guess there. All right, let's keep this moving. We look ahead to the Heat's biggest test of the season so far after this. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show is to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. The Heat face the Knicks Wednesday night. This is probably the best team they've faced so far this season. Although, I don't know, maybe depending on how, like, the Orlando Magic look really good, and Paolo Banchero just scored 50 points. So maybe the Magic are actually the better team. But the Knicks, at least on paper, are a really stiff test here. They're scoring 118.3 points per 100 possessions. That's one of the best offenses in the league. That said, the Knicks, their defense has been awful so far. It's very clear that Karl-Anthony Towns is still working into things. They're without Mitchell Robinson, without Precious Achiuwa, so they've missed some guys that are important off their bench, but their point of attack defense has been weirdly poor, despite having OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges there. But those are still pretty those are tough defenders for Terry Rozier and Tyler Herro to deal with. So what are you looking at in terms of like the keys to victory here, Heat Knicks?
The Bam Cat matchup is one that I think is a key point there. Keeping Jalen Brunson off the line too. Like he's very good at drawing fouls and kind of selling contact, etc. And when you have two guards like Tyler and Terry who are going to be physical and try to take advantage of that in order to make up for their kind of physical deficiencies, that could be somewhat problematic if Brunson's able to get to the line a lot. Those are the basic things, and then I don't know. Anunoby just seems like he's going to have one of those kind of games where he might be the odd man out and he winds up catching fire, etc. I don't know. There's just so many different players there that could prop up at any point and wind up having big games. But those are the kind of the keys that I'm looking for the most. What about you?
Yeah, I think make sure, number one, that Jalen Brunson doesn't beat them. We saw Cade Cunningham go off in that first half for the Pistons and then kind of had a quieter second half. Jalen Brunson's not somebody who has quiet halves. Jalen Brunson tends to dominate every minute that he's in there, and he stresses
he hasn't
the defense
been as
in a major
dominant.
way.
Not to interrupt, but he hasn't been as dominant this year as he is.
But he does put a lot of stress on a defense, and it's going to be a tall test for Terry Rozier and Tyler Herro in this game. Like Terry Rozier is going to be the one tasked with guarding Brunson from the jump. that's going to be a tough matchup. And Brunson's going to get him into foul trouble, probably.
Mhm.
And it's something Rozier's got to look out for. So that's what I'm looking at. And, I think the Heat have been approaching their 9th and 10th men in the rotation, sort of based on matchup a little bit. Like no Haywood Highsmith against Charlotte. We see him against Detroit. I think we'll probably see him in this game too as another kind of weapon to use against Brunson there. I think Jimmy Butler is going to pick up Jalen Brunson quite a bit in this game also, especially if Jalen Brunson gets going here. But yeah, I think you're right. The Bam Cat matchup is big. Like whoever wins that is going to set their team up for success here. And then at that point, I think the Heat just can't let Jalen Brunson go off for 40 points. Like you said, he hasn't exploded yet this season. You don't want it to happen in this one because he's due. It's going to happen. He's too good. And it's just like, all right, like let's just make sure it doesn't happen against us.
What have you liked about the Mikal Bridges fit so far? It seems it has some moments, but then there are some times there where it does look a little bit clunky. He's averaging almost 19 points per game, so it's not bad. He hasn't been necessarily the kind of immediate fit that a lot of people expect him to be, but at the same time, I think he's still been mostly good. Although I haven't seen much from him on the defensive end necessarily.
Yeah, the defense has been weird. You would think it would be better. I think he's still working through some things. He changed his jump shot all of a sudden. He's shooting 35% from three. That's been a weird sort of Markelle Fultzian sort of storyline going on with him. I don't really, nobody, it's like this big mysterious thing. So again, another guy that you just hope he doesn't figure out that jump shot against Miami, which it just feels like this always happens against the Heat. It's like all these guys just sort of figure it out and they have their best game against them. But yeah, I haven't been that impressed with anything that they've done, but I also expected a slow start. Like I've expected a slow start given all the changes. There's just a lot of things to work through for the Knicks, and it feels like they're working through it in real time. And so I think if I'm the Heat, I keep trying to junk things up the way that I've been doing, especially against the Pistons, where you get 14 or 15 steals in that game. Like that's sort of the way to make sure, all right, we don't want the Knicks to get in rhythm. It's only a matter of time until they do. Let's just make sure it doesn't happen against us. And the way to make sure that doesn't, the way to prevent it is to junk it up. Get those deflections, get in those passing lanes, just make things as difficult as possible, give them a headache, and make them feel terrible on their way out of here. And that would be my sort of main message if I'm Eric Spoelstra. The other thing I'm looking at too here, the battle of the benches. The Heat have the third best bench in the league. They're outscoring their opponents by 6.5 points with their bench. A big part of that is because Jimmy Butler is sort of the leader of that bench unit. So that obviously helps. But the Knicks don't have any such thing. You know, they don't have a Jimmy Butler. Like when Jalen Brunson's in the game, he's typically in the game with the other starters. When he's off the floor, it's a lot of Deuce McBride going on in New York. And Deuce McBride is fine, and he's on my fantasy basketball team, but I don't need him to have a good night on Wednesday night. So but he's also one of those guys that can get going, right? He's sort of one of those microwave guys. But
he had his moments against Miami too. And again, that's you might see a lot of Drew Smith minutes then, I guess, being that unless they stagger them necessarily, I think he'll probably get his opportunities as a backup point to kind of pick up McBride a little bit and make things
that's a good call.
A little bit more
unless you want to go the Alec Burks revenge game.
That would be against half the league, and I don't know if it necessarily works at this point, but you brought up a good point about Highsmith. Like, I think this is a great opportunity for him because it seems like he would thrive in that matchup versus Brunson because he's so big and so long, and he's so good at moving, etc. He could really he might be the one player on this team that has as good a chance of any of defending him at the highest level without getting into foul trouble. Like it's Haywood Highsmith, so he's probably going to get a call against him. But overall, he's probably one of those players who can use his speed and quickness and athleticism to be able to limit what Brunson can do. So I'm now that you,
I think we could see a lot of Highsmith minutes too, because it might not be a good Jovic game. This could be a tough matchup with him. We talked about yesterday about how he struggled against Tobias Harris. Like OG Anunoby's physical. He's going to get Nico into foul trouble. And so he'll obviously start the game, but this might be another one of those where it's like 13 minutes for Nico and like 20 plus for Haywood, 20 plus for Jaime Jaquez, and it's probably Jaime closing the game, which is fine. Again, like this is why you have options, is so that you can figure out what you got to do rotation wise based on your matchup. So if I'm worried about anybody, it's probably him.
Yeah, I'm not too keen on that Jaime versus Anunoby matchup either, although obviously he'll be coming off the bench. But I mean, if it's a closing lineup and it's a clutch game or something like that where you need some good production from Jaquez, that's not ideal. I think Anunoby's a hell of a defender. We've talked about that a lot on this show, but certainly That's one of the reasons why he's in New York and why they're so bullish on their chances this season. So it's going to be interesting how Eric Spoelstra and Tom Thibodeau kind of manage their rotations and make adjustments in game, and that seems like it would be an advantage for Spo. Is a huge factor. We haven't got any clarification. Is Kevin Love still likely to be out?
Yeah, we still don't know. I'm assuming at this point, yes, because until I hear anything, I'm just assuming that he's away from the team. So
yeah,
the Miami Heat are 1-point underdogs.
Oof.
According
it's not
to
much of a
FanDuel.
home court advantage. Yeah, it's not much of a home court advantage, unfortunately.
I think I got that right. Underdogs. Let me just double check. Yeah, 1-point underdogs at home. If you feel like betting it,
orange and blue. Yeah,
use our FanDuel promo code there. Yeah. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Your favorite podcast now is a newsletter introducing the Locked On Heat daily newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Heat newsletter. Let's get more subscriptions in the Locked On Knicks newsletter. How about that as a challenge? Let's have more subscriptions on the Locked On Knicks newsletter by the end of that game. I think we're a little behind right now. So go to LockedOnDaily.com to subscribe. Talk to you after the Knicks game.